Well, good afternoon. Welcome to the IGIA Women's Network Work-Life Balance panel. We are fortunate to have three industry leaders here with us today. I'm Kara Clark, Senior Quality and Customer Experience Manager at Come & Go, and I'll be your moderator this afternoon. I will now introduce our panelists. First, from Casey's General Store, we have Julie Jakowski. Julie is Chief Legal Officer and Corporate Secretary for Casey's. Julie, would you like to share your work experience a little bit and a little bit about yourself?
Oh, sure. And hopefully this is just so you all, in case you have any questions, you can let me know. I've been with, I graduated from Drake Law School and was in litigation practice for a couple of years, and came to Casey's in 1994 and never thought I would stay here this long. And now I'm an old timer here at Casey's, which is crazy. I was one of the first employment law attorneys, so dealing mainly with all the personnel issues and operations issues. And then I was a VP of HR and handled all kinds of a plethora of issues with that. And then recently went back I guess it was in 2010, became general counsel and then chief legal officer more recently. And I guess on the personal note, since we're doing work-life balance, I have 4 kids. They range from 20 to 34 because 2 of them are stepkids. 2 cats, a dog, and a husband who has been staying home all during lovely quarantine. So I'm very happy that I've been able to come to work, because after 2 months, I realized retirement is not an option at this point. So there you got my background.
Thanks, Julie. Next, we have Nathalie Nunez. Nathalie is the Senior Director of Planning for the Central Division of PepsiCo. Nathalie, would you share your work experience and a little bit about your life?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. So I've been about 24 years of work experience. I graduated from Purdue University with an industrial engineering degree. Pretty much have been in the supply chain realm. Started out in manufacturing for a couple of years, did warehousing as well as transportation. And then in the last 13 years of my career, I've kind of found my, kind of my niche in supply chain planning. So my team is in charge of ensuring that we're producing the right products and getting the right portfolio to our satellites to ensure that all of your retail shelves are full, which has been extremely challenging in this COVID environment, because definitely a lot more people are going to the grocery store, which is a good problem to have for all of us, I think. And then on the personal front, I actually grew up in Chicago, moved to New York for about 10 years, which is like the perfect place to have 2 children in Manhattan. Obviously, I'm being that sarcastic there, but anyways, wanted to kind of get them back to normal life. Moved back to Chicago 4 years ago. So that's a little bit of my background. My daughter is 11 and my son is 9. So kind of in the midst of I can understand what everyone's going through with trying to work from home, trying to do remote learning, and everything under the sun. So anyways, thanks for having me. Looking forward to this conversation.
Thanks, Nathalie. Last, but certainly not least, is Kate Gibson Overby. Kate is the Vice President of Marketing Communications for Come & Go. Kate, would you share your work experience and a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks so much, Kara. And hello, fellow panelists. It's a delight to be here with you today. So I would say I have a fairly non-traditional work experience in terms of how I got to my current position, which I joined Come & Go 2 years ago this August, and feel really lucky to head up the marketing and communications brand team. In terms of background, went to Bowdoin College and then in Maine, and then spent quite a bit of time working for a number of nonprofits, causes, women's rights organization in Zimbabwe, a lot of international work, and found my way to grad school, working on international economics actually, and looking at how businesses can really be transformative in power in the world. And I'm also a real sports enthusiast. So those two sort of pieces came together. I cut my professional teeth working at Nike's global European, Middle Eastern, African headquarters outside of Amsterdam. And then from there, traveled with the company back to the United States, worked on global projects, but based out of the New York office. Ended up staying in New York about 13 years. After I left Nike, I worked for Major League Baseball and started their cause marketing department and was the brand director for the league. So then I moved to Atlanta when I got married, and my husband was from there, and we were picking a city. And so I worked for Coca-Cola North America on a number of different brand and communications initiatives across brands, including sports as well, and became a mom. I have two young kids who at the start of the pandemic were 3 and 5, are now 4 and 6. And yeah, we're rocking around right here in Des Moines. So it's a little bit about me and how I got here.
Thank you, Kate. Well, welcome, distinguished panelists. Thank you for taking part in today's panel, and thank you, attendees, for joining us this afternoon. Please keep yourself muted until the question and answer portion of the webinar. During the webinar, if you think of a question, feel free to write it in the chat, and we'll read them to the panel during the question and answer portion. So let's get started. First question, how would you describe an ideal work-life balance? Nathalie, let's start with you.
I think an ideal work-life balance, I'm sure it's a different answer for many people, but I think overall, if you can accomplish what you set yourself, in your career, without limiting yourself, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. If you can accomplish those things and get your team to accomplish, kind of those metrics that you strive for and your objectives, but at the same time able to be an active participant in your, and for me, it's my children's lives. That's like my biggest part of life right now. When I say work-life balance, I told myself I wanted to just be active in their lives, but still have a career. To me, that is ideal, that I can still be, when we had room moms, and when I was able to coach my daughter's lacrosse team, but still be able to kind of, work through the organization and develop my career. To me, that's been ideal. I've been very grateful to have that.
Thank you. Julie, how about you? Oh, Julie, you're on mute.
I did a whole blog on that early in COVID about, hey, you're on mute. You'll have to go look it up. Oh God, she just did it. Sorry about that, everybody. And I see many of my Casey's cohorts on here. So I'm like, all right, don't make fun of me behind the scenes either, folks. That's right. I think the work-life balance is really important. And I think it's been accentuated during COVID, because you really have to figure out how to do this, especially if you're at home, which at first seems like a luxury, but I found it's better for me to be separated. So I think, having those parameters, setting what are your expectations at work and at home? Are there certain things that you want to get done? What's really important? I think prioritizing things at home is just as important as prioritizing things at work, because I think if you're really on that career trajectory, or you put in a lot of hours at work, you simply can't get everything done in both places. So knowing what's really important, I think, having family be a priority. I'm really fortunate that I'm at a place where family is always priority. And I was told that, in my final interview, I'll never forget it, 26 years ago, that family comes before your job. But they also said you're expected to work really hard while you're here. So that's how I look at that work-life balance. What am I trying to do in each? What am I trying to accomplish? And then do my very best in both of those areas. You can't let one slip. And it's a really slippery slope. And I think that's what we're going to talk about today, of just trying to figure out how you maneuver through that whole deal.
Thank you, Julie. Kate, how about you?
For me, it's been thinking about just what's the choice for me right now. And I would say it's changed a lot throughout my career. So what sort of is the smart choice for me when I was in a different role, in a different city, single without kids? What was that smart choice then? Well, I mean, frankly, I worked different hours and I spent more time on different things for self-care. I, was a marathoner, and things like that. And then as I've transitioned in my career and things have changed for me personally, what the smart choice is for me now, like during COVID with kids at home, et cetera, it's a day-to-day and that's constantly changing. So it's making the choice and feeling supported by my professional community. So echoing Julie, absolutely. It's this idea of an environment that supports you and can say, you as a human being come first, really first, and then navigating those choices and what the options are on a day-to-day basis and sort of giving yourself as much as you can that grace to know what worked yesterday or what worked last week or last hour might not work now. So how do you continually look at what that smart choice is, and less about ideal and more about options, flexibility, and maneuvering it with that agility as much as you can.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thanks, Kate. All right, on to the next question. Do you think that it gets easier to find a work-life balance the farther along you get in your career? Julie, what has been your experience?
I think that's an interesting question because it's a yes and no. Initially when I thought about it, I thought, well, gosh, as you get, your kids get older or you're single and you're working, that balance is easier. And then I really, as I reflected, I think I did a better job balancing when I had 4 kids in activities because I knew exactly what the schedule was. I knew how much time I had, and I knew I had to get everything done. And I found, especially with COVID, when I was working from home, it's very hard to separate work from home when you're working from home, and you've got to set those parameters. Or when the kids are gone, and they're off at college doing their thing, or even beyond, I find myself staying at work unnecessarily long periods of time and remembering, oh gosh, my husband would probably like to see me on occasion, or maybe not, but I'd like to think that he does. And so I think, again, it goes to what Kate was saying, is where are you in your life? And then you're going to have to adjust what it is that work-life balance looks like, and remind yourself that you do have to balance that out. It can't be all work and it can't be all flexibility. We've got to have that nice balance to make it all work together.
Kate, what's been your experience?
It has changed. I would say that in some ways, developing the confidence and seeing more models of how it's done, and having a lot of great leaders, working for terrific leaders who have navigated those different life milestones and different chapters, and modeling that for me and showing what that can be has given me, I think, greater perspective for not only sort of carving out and realizing that often we have a lot of permission if we figure out what it is and make it work and kind of put that forward and show it's a sustainable model. And also an ability to kind of make room for our own teams as people leaders and what that can be and kind of how that goes. So I think, ideally, as we build more networks, as we get more skill sets, as we also, get into a position of more experience under our belt, it can lead to sort of more balance. But I will also say that with more responsibility, it absolutely is this buck stops here. When things happen and when there's a need, I just have to flex. I just have to say, okay, that model that I planned on, or that, scheduled for today, it's just going to have to pause because my work team really needs me now. And this is why having a support system, having a phenomenal partner, having those additional resources, which I feel really, really grateful to tap into, great childcare, great network of support, that's when those come into play even more, and building those up over time and knowing that I'll need to go to the well when I least expect it is something that I've had to intentionally grow and continue to invest in, so that when we really need it, it's there. No.
Great. Nathalie, how about you?
Well, I think, I definitely agree, with what Julie and Kate said, but the other thing, kind of as you, take on more responsibility or grow in your career, you're just more mature and more confident with yourself. That I think that makes a big difference, because then you're comfortable kind of setting expectations with your boss, with your team, that you might have been shyer to do or hesitant to do because you really weren't as comfortable in your own skin earlier in your career. You know what I mean? So I think with that also, I don't know if it's easier, because like Julie said, you also have to kind of hold yourself back sometimes. But as far as like setting those expectations, you just get more comfortable doing that as you just mature in your career. So that part, I think, can make things easier.
Mm-hmm. Great. Has COVID, and for many, the shift to working at home, affected work-life balance for you? Kate, has this affected you?
Absolutely. I mean, in so many ways, I feel like we could just do this question, right? There's so many, and it's constantly changing even now. I will say that I'm really one of the lucky ones. I mean, COVID has just been so devastating for so many people, and so many of the statistics and studies show that women in particular have been disproportionately impacted, and really hard hit, as are, many, COVID it's devastated so much, not just careers, but entire lives. So I'm very conscious that I'm extremely fortunate. I would say that while my work translates pretty well to the world of Zoom calls, et cetera, and I have been very, very fortunate to have the support of the organization and ability to work remotely and keep things going in different ways. The massive disruption has been a humbling learning experience. I have previous experience of working with international teams, multiple time zones, and an ability to kind of work remotely. So the technology doesn't sort of scare me off initially, sort of out of the gate in terms of an ability to use it, but it has been tiresome. It's inevitably led to, I would say, more work. I think on average, I say workers in general spend working about 70 minutes more per day. And I think that there's this, ability to constantly, figure out what those needs of the day might be, find ways to connect with my team when half of us have not ever met, outside the screen has been its own challenge, onboarding. And then drawing those lines. I work a lot more evenings because I know sometimes during the day there will be interruptions, there'll be, just things that wouldn't happen if I were out of sight and off site. And so it's constantly, being flexible and mindful that everyone on my team has different needs as well. And so as a manager, trying to be really sensitive to what those might be. It's a challenge. Yeah.
Absolutely. Nathalie, how about you? How has this affected you?
So it's definitely, I mean, there's definitely advantages and disadvantages. Hopefully you can still hear me because everyone on this.
Yep, you're good. Oh, just as I said that, she froze. All right, Julie, let's go to you next, and hopefully she can
Let's
get
do that.
back on soon.
She'll come back in a second here. Yeah. I mean, I think, I've alluded to a little bit, Casey's with COVID, and it's probably like a lot of retail organizations. We weren't really set up for everyone to work from home. It was not a flexible work schedule, and very few people that worked remotely. So it was all hands on deck for 2 weeks of how in the world do we make this work? And so, it was a miracle that we did it. I think it was amazing. I should call it amazing. Really, that's what I should say instead of a miracle. And it's worked really well. But, I think that balance, I found it very difficult. And I'm sure most of you have, because I see a lot of you guys that look like you're working from home. It's very hard to separate your work environment from your home environment. My house, was built for 4 kids. It does not have an office in it. So the dining room became my office. And, at a certain time, you just have to remember, gosh, I'm not used to having my computer on all the time. I need to actually shut it off, because if it's on and I see it blinking, I'll go to it. And most of the stuff coming through is really not that important that you have to answer it at 7 o'clock at night. As a boss, I always tell people, hey, just because you send it at 11 o'clock does not impress me unless it was really important. You stopped emailing me at 11 o'clock at night. I've noticed that even as we've continued, because I'm back in the office and have been since last June, but most of the folks that work for me are not back in the office. And when I have the opportunity to fill in for somebody and look at time cards, for instance, this happened a couple of weeks ago. I said, why are you all not taking any lunches? And it's not because I don't believe that they're working. Oh, well, we're sitting here. And I said, you have to take a lunch. You have to, your mind has to do something else during the day. And, that goes into that work-life balance even there of, even if whether you're at work or at home, even during the day, we've got to get our minds on something else to get free, to re-energize ourselves. And so I think that's really important, of staying in your routine as much as you can pre-COVID, to just try to get yourself back and settled into what is going to be the new normal, we hope.
Thanks, Julie. Nathalie, it looks like we have you back. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I'm sorry about that. Can you hear me?
Yep, you're all good.
I had to switch to my phone.
we'll go ahead. Julie went ahead and went. So if you, you want me to repeat the question?
Was it how has COVID changed?
Yep.
Yeah, so I think there's definitely been advantages and disadvantages. I think the disadvantage, so the advantage is the commute. I used to have to take a 1-hour train ride into downtown Chicago, and a round trip, it would be about 3 hours altogether, getting up at 5 a.m. and all of that good stuff. That's an advantage that I haven't had to do that. And now I've replaced it with, doing a yoga workout or, I just got the hydro machine, which is kind of a version of Peloton, but for rowing, things like that. I've kind of taken advantage of that time. But then the negative part of it, and I don't know if anyone else touched on this, is that my computer is always right there. And I end up working way more hours than I did before. Because at least before, when I had to go catch my train, I shut down and I kind of decompress. Now there's no decompressing. It's going straight from my computer to like getting dinner ready. And then once dinner is ready, it's like, oh, the computer is right there. So that's the part that I've had to really kind of check myself sometimes and say, you know what, like just walk away and spend some time with your kids. So that's, again, there's been pluses and minuses. The silver linings I'm trying to take advantage of, but definitely it's been a change for sure.
For sure. I think a lot of us, almost all of us can probably relate to that. All right, next question. Do you think that enjoying life outside of work can enhance your performance in your job? Julie, what have you found?
I think absolutely, and I think, since we've got all ladies for the most part on here, I mean, I think we like to be busy and we're always, trying to find something else to do. But I think finding something that interests you, and it doesn't have to be something huge. It could be that you like to work out or a hobby or go to movies, or you're a Netflix binger. If you do that, remember Casey's is in one of the episodes of Tiger King. So go find it, right? But it's okay, but find something else to do. I watch the most stupid television shows and my husband's always like, oh my gosh, that is dumb. And I'm like, yeah, because it's mindless and it's just fun. I don't want to have to think about what I'm doing, and I can laugh. I think the other thing is when you're well-rounded, we bring more to the business environment, because if your mind is just focused on whatever your expertise is or whatever your area of interest is at work, we really can't see how all of the other people in our business environment actually operate and why they think the way that they do. So, get out, network, have some fun, and this is more the negative part of it, but if all you do is work and something goes sour at work, there's not a lot of opportunity on the other end. So always keep your options open by networking and keeping your mind open.
Thanks, Julie. Kate, what have you found?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I was head nodding there on Julie's. I think to do great work, you need perspective, and that requires just getting outside of just one thing and having fun. Really being that well-rounded person. Whatever your jam, go pursue it. And I think the other thing is that when you only flex one way and you don't expand, your world can become really small and your point of view becomes really limited. And I think that's a risk we all have to safeguard against. No matter where we are, organizations tend to be, even if they work against it, tend to be pretty insular. And we all get in rhythms and grooves, and especially in my work, where you're trying to always thinking about the consumer and think about people who aren't you, and think about multiple perspectives. It's super important to just to bring that awareness. And then just as a human being, you got to take care to be your best self, keep your energy up, and have fun along the way. So 100%.
Great. Nathalie, how about you?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think you just need that other something else to think about besides work, right? And I just think you become more, I think the reason your performance is better just is you've got other things to kind of revive you to just kind of get yourself back into the work mode. So I think absolutely, I think having that outside of work enjoyment definitely reflects your performance.
Wonderful. Right, moving on to the next question. Do you think it is harder for men or women to achieve a work-life balance, and why do you think that? Nathalie, what's your take?
So this is an interesting question, right? Because I think if you probably those articles that was referred to earlier, I think Julie had mentioned, or maybe it was Kate, but as far as, women just being disproportionately impacted with COVID, I think that really affects your work-life balance, just because women tend to take on the family duties and but again, it can, I've been very fortunate where my partner and I agreed, very in the very beginning, that we were going to be partners in crime through this whole life journey with kids and all of that good stuff. So for me, I think it's been a lot easier, but I've also seen, I've seen it the other way, where I think if you don't have that understanding, it can be much more difficult, because I think women tend to take it all on, right? And that's where I think that becomes challenging if you don't have that understanding in the very beginning. That's my perspective.
Yeah, for sure. Julie, what's your take?
Gosh, and it's a great segue into what, I was kind of thinking on this, I think because women, I think, typically tend to focus on it more. It may seem like it's more easy, but it's just because we're just trying to get it all done. I know, and this, I can only speak for my family. The men in my family think that they multitask and really have a great work-life balance. I'm like, really? You go to work and then watch the NCAA tournament all night? I'm not quite sure how that is a great work-life balance, right? But it is. That's the balancing act sometimes. And I know when we had little kids, it wasn't that my husband didn't want to go do all these things, but he didn't think about, well, if we're out of town, who's handling the dog and who's getting the kids to the events and who's taking, they just think it happens sometimes. And so, I think it's, I think because I focused on it, it didn't seem that difficult. But I think you do have to have, like Nathalie was talking about, you have to have that partner in crime and really talk it out. Especially if you've got a very busy job that may pull with those time pressures, making sure everybody's on the same page. And I think, really the big thing is if you're doing a lot, my mom always said, the dishes will wait, but the kids, this is your time with them. And I think that's something we have to think about. You can't strive for perfection too much, because if you only have a limited amount of time with your family, don't worry about the dirty dish if you can go outside in the yard and play, right? So I always took that to heart, and now my house is cleaner with the kids gone. So your house will become clean once again someday.
Maybe we should have a discussion around house cleaning at some point. Do you do it yourself? Do you hire it out? Do you have your kids do it? That's the struggle I'm dealing with right now.
That's funny. And I'll just add, because that's my husband's idea of work-life balance. He says, why don't you hire it out? And I say, because they won't do it like I want them to. And
yeah,
he's like, then that's your problem. And I'm like, you're right. You're right. It is my problem. And so I clean it. You got it.
Oh, Kate, what's your take on this?
Yeah, it's so individual, and also there are these trends. I think in women in general, we tend to be really hard on ourselves, and sort of I personally like giving myself that permission to, like, okay, how are we going to make this work today, and what's that model? One of the examples is my husband does all of the cooking during the week. He does all the cooking. I do the shopping, he does the cooking, and actually, I think it's pretty cool. At first, I was sort of, racked with guilt a little bit, or really feeling conflicted, because I have such strong memories of my mom's cooking, and all of that, and how we nourish our family is something that just as a mom, I care deeply about. And so I was sort of really thinking like, this is this deficiency, or I'm letting the family down. And then I realized, first of all, that's not true. And I cook on the weekends, just not during the week. But also, my kids will read a kid's book and think it's no big deal if, like, oh, well, Papa does the cooking or whatever, or, they're getting a real blend and new models and different models. So, we say a lot around here that parenting is a team sport. And what we do, one day is not the next, and it's okay to have kind of that personal definition of what it is for you and your own family. And I have friends who are stay-at-home dads, I have friends who are women who have left the workforce and are, stay-at-home moms. And I think, if we can recognize and be supportive of each other across all of those and make, so much space and support for the multiple models and give ourselves our own permission and like let ourselves off the hook, there can be a lot of benefit. But yeah.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
my husband's a great cook, which helps, but it changes every day.
That definitely
How I
helps.
feel. Mhm.
Thanks, Kate. How do you think people can balance having children and achieving their professional goals? Julie, what's your advice?
Gosh, I mean, this is a great question because it doesn't have to be an either or. So, when I got married, I actually immediately acquired a 4 and a 6-year-old whom I love as my own, but, I never even had that newlywed period, went right into parenting. And, so it's hard. You have to wrap your mind around it, but it certainly doesn't have to be either or. It doesn't have to be, hey, if I want to excel in my career, that means that somebody else has to be doing everything with my kids. I think you just have to set expectations at home and also with your employer, because I think that's really important, that communication. I think COVID is going to be awesome for this going forward because we've already had all of these discussions of, what do we need to do for childcare, and I can't work from this period to this period because I have to be at home being the teacher. And I'm so thankful I did not have to be the teacher. Kudos to all of you who have. But, take advantage of this opportunity that you've had the ability to start having these kinds of discussions, because I think it's going to really change the workplace. I think back when I was growing up, my dad was a CPA and had his own firm. And for anybody who works with CPAs, they love to work all the time. So he was a workaholic and would be the kind running into my band concert right before I played, right? And I never thought a thing of it until I had my own kids. And I'm like, that, I want to make sure I'm there and I'm present as much as possible. But I think also setting that expectation with your family that, especially if you get into a leadership role in your profession, there are times you're going to be pulled away and, and you're going to miss some things that you don't really want to miss at home. And it's just the way that it is. But helping your family to set those expectations at the onset is very helpful. So you don't, shatter their dreams that you didn't make it right for that one clarinet concert or whatever it might be. But family is key. And I think that's the important thing is to remember that. And, that goes also for all you single folks out there too. There's a lot of things going on in your lives and you're busy with that as well. And I think it's important that I always say this in any panel I'm on, but the single folks sometimes have to pick up the slack for the rest of the family folks. And that's not always fair either. So make sure you speak your mind as well.
Yeah, great advice. Kate, what advice do you have?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I'll say it's tough to give advice because I'm still figuring it out, but I will say that some things that I draw from is that it's intention and presence, but it's quality, not quantity. One of the tricks for me has also just been this idea. So, for example, like if I'm going to be checking email, it's after hours, and I'm, in the sandbox with my kids, I'll really try to draw those lines. We'll say, hey, sweetie, I need to check this email right now and then come back and then we'll do the sandcastle and try to explain it. So communicating with my kids, especially so that they are aware of the stops and starts. Because I think when work becomes sort of this constant background noise for me and for them, and it's just its presence without explanation, they can't look at my phone. They don't know what's going on. And so if I can be a bridge and communicate that and let them know, then what I see, as much as I worry, that actually they do really well. They're able to, although they think my job, I think, is that I make a lot of phone calls. So there's been that but explaining things and trying to make sure, that if I know that they're all right and that they're going to get a lot from the world and from other people, other voices, other teachers, and if I can let them in and show them, that I'm learning every day like they are. It's not school, but we're all learning, and that we'll try to help people and sort of using that language in a way that I really relate to and that makes sense for them helps me keep that ongoing dialogue with them and gives me a lot of support as we navigate it together.
Great, thanks, Kate. Nathalie, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I think Julie's spot on when she said, it shouldn't be a choice to get to your professional goals or children. Because, I've definitely coached women on my team or outside of my team who's asked for advice, or I've tapped them on the shoulder and said, hey, I think this would be a great opportunity for you. What do you think? And they're like, and they hold themselves back and say, well, I don't really want to jump into that role because I'm thinking about having kids. So that's the one thing I'll say to folks on this call that are thinking of having kids. Like, don't, just because you want to have kids, you should not be holding yourself back from what your professional goals are, because you'll be surprised on what you can make happen. Because it's, I thought the same thing, like, how can I work these crazy hours and have kids? Well, those crazy hours, you find a way to all of a sudden prioritize what needs to happen today, so you could still go home and pick up the kids from daycare or relieve the nanny or whatever the case may be. So I think it's setting those expectations that we talked about earlier and having a great partner. So all those things kind of combined, I think it's definitely possible to do both.
I was just going to add too, that jogged my memory, Natalie, is that I had some great advice. I interviewed for a job and I was pregnant, and then they offered me the job a little bit earlier before I was, sort of really telling people. And I thought, oh no, what do I do? And I just felt this need to share it, of course, but at the same time, a real fear of, what if I'm not going to get the job offer? What would that mean? Taking the legal stuff aside, just sort of feeling like, is this going to be an inviting environment? And so I called mentors of mine, and they all consistently said, if they don't support you in this, you don't want to be there. And it was great advice. And when I, told my then boss, she welcomed me, it was like, congratulations was the first word she said, and let's navigate this together. And I felt tons of support, but it was definitely something that I had this fear and discomfort around. And then in communicating and talking about it and recognizing I needed an environment that was going to see me through that journey was, it was so important and ended up being a great gift. So.
That's awesome advice. Thanks, Kate. All right. How do you balance being a good parent and our spouse while moving your career forward? Natalie, how do you handle it?
So, I think many of us probably are perfectionists, and it can never be the best. Like, there's always a room for opportunity, right? But at the same time, I think I mentioned it earlier, is kind of setting those expectations. I told myself when I was pregnant with my first, that I did not want to be those parents that outsourced raising my children, especially being in Manhattan at the time. Like, having a nanny was a very normal thing, and I was commuting and the hours were crazy. But at the same time, I really said to myself, like, that is not who I want to be. So from the very beginning, I set that expectation with my manager at the time, and my spouse as well. Like I said, my partner, he knew my professional goals, so he supported it all the way, so that we were a partner. But again, I don't think that. I think it's just setting or keeping your, and I know we're going to talk a little bit about this later, but just like holding yourself accountable to being active in your children's lives. And then also, remembering your partner, right? Because that's the other thing, that sometimes it's pretty easy to keep our kids in the forefront, but I think our spouse is the one that kind of probably is last on the list. And he reminds me once in a while that he gets kind of put last on the list. But I think, like, holding myself accountable to that, to giving him the time, as well as my kids the time. But again, I don't think those things should hold you back from moving forward.
Julie, how do you handle it?
Yeah, I know, and we've talked a lot about kids, and I think just what she said, as far as sometimes the spouses feel like, or the significant others feel like they're the last on the list. And so, I think you have to discuss the pressures that are occurring at work, especially if it's some kind of, time element, that this is going to take more time, or I have to go travel, or that sort of thing. My husband's an attorney also, so early in our career, we always knew we could never talk about work. That's fun because he did criminal defense work, and and now I work for a public company, so I can't talk about anything. So you're like, what do you do at work? Oh, it was a great day. We move on, right? But you do have to say, gosh, there's a lot of stress going on, or there's a lot of pressure, and you can at least speak generally about what's happening and those time constraints. So I think that's important. Although he doesn't want to hear all the drama of the day, at least to let them know what's happening. I think the other thing that's really important, because I've seen it with other ladies that are moving ahead in their careers, the trajectory is not always the same with both spouses as far as moving up the ranks, and that can create a lot of stress as well, especially if you're moving ahead and you're thinking, gosh, my spouse is a different trajectory in the career. But I think it's with anything, always remember that the spouses or our significant others or our families are really supporting us elsewhere and doing other things to make us able to do what we're doing. So I think one thing I've tried to do is if I think I've had a great day and there are all these great successes, I don't come home and tout all the wonderful things that happened that day. I'd say, we've separated, we're now back into family time. And if something interesting comes up, that's great. But I think remembering that, they have feelings too. And while we're trying to do all these wonderful things, they are supporting us behind the scenes. And that's super important for us to advance, to have that support system behind us.
Yeah, most definitely. Kate, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think both of you said it so well. And I'm so grateful for my husband and the team and my overall family. I think that one just additional thought that I think a lot about is just creativity, in terms of like that balance, again, just changes so much, but creative thinking and this idea of like, okay, it's going to be messy. We don't, just got asked to take this work trip. Husband just got a call, what is this going to mean? But just sort of that creative problem solving and having each other's back. And that trust is something that is so critical. And having just that flexibility of, as much as you can. But yeah, I say thank you a lot because I'm very grateful for the ways that I have the support. So yeah.
I think we just have time for like one more question, and so I'll just leave it up to the three of you to answer. But do you have like any final tips or knowledge that you want to share with the group on how you have been able to create a work-life balance? Kate, do you have anything else beyond what you've said that you want to share with the group?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for what it's worth, I think, this idea that no one has it completely figured out, I take real comfort in. I mean, I again, am so inspired by people who, have these different hacks, and I continually kind of pull friends or go, oh, wow, okay, that's great. Or just even things that I've tried to emulate, like at a manager who refused to apologize for any family commitment. They just like, I'm not going to use the word I'm sorry. If my daughter's school calls, I take the call because I don't apologize, when my company calls, why, and sort of like, even maybe language, giving ourselves permission, or, just continually kind of building our tools set, our kit for how we use it. There's this idea that it's not one static recipe, and that, or even, sort of a static piece any one moment in a day, but knowing that for me can be affirming, and just continually applying that kind of open-mindedness, creativity, grace, and appreciation for me has been really helpful. And then also, as a people leader, whatever I can do to think about, it's not just me, it's my team and other people. How do I model that? And how do I kind of open the door for other people and continue to evolve? So those are some thoughts.
Great, thanks, Kate. Nathalie, do you have any final tips to share?
I think that, the one tip I'll say is I have been really fortunate to have women to look up to as far as how they're able to grow in their career and also raise a family. The first time I remember coming from a very male-dominated organization into Pepsi and being in a conference call and one of the female senior leaders had her kid in the background, kind of crying. And she didn't apologize for it or anything. She just kind of said, oh yeah, he's not feeling well today, so he's home from school. And it was what it was. But just having that reinforcement around you that it's okay, those things happen. But also having those mentors to rely on, and just to or even peers to rely on, and also be available to other women. Like I've found that, I really definitely give back now that I'm kind of in the place that I'm at in my career. For folks that are, starting their families out and having all these questions. So that's what I would say is take advantage of the women around you, and also, kind of pay it forward later.
Wonderful. Thank you. Julie, what do you have for final parting thoughts?
Gosh, and I'll try not to repeat what they both said, because I think, those were on my list and they were, great things. I think, something that we haven't talked about is just, I think they had sent us a couple just tidbits of things to think about before this. And one of them was on how do you keep yourself accountable to following through and whatever your plan is, whatever, that's been at work or at home. And I think, I wrote down, I keep lists. Well, you'd love my list, because I start a list today, but then I'll have another list next week. So it's not like I have a great to-do list. It's just, but that's my processing. I think probably for my legal stuff, I'm just used to writing. And when I write something, it sticks in my brain better. And understanding that you're going to have more added to your plate all the time, at work and at home and with your family, or, maybe one of your parents gets sick and you have to take care of your parent. I mean, there's always going to be something that's added. And there's only so many hours in the day. So I know, everybody here is, you're retail or you work with retail. And we always say, at Casey's, all right, if we give the store managers a new 15-minute task, 15 minutes of something else has to come off the plate. There's only so many hours in the day, and that works with us in the professional world as well. So, reprioritizing, if you feel overwhelmed in a particular area, make that list, jot down, okay, what are the 5 things that are the most important that I have to get done? Well, the rest are just going to have to wait. And, that's reprioritizing in your personal life as well. And, I think the other thing that I think most of us that are on the panel are in leadership positions. And I see some of the folks that I know on the call that some are, some aren't. And remember, go talk to your leaders. We're all there. We're all ladies. We've all been where you are. And, would very much, appreciate you coming in if you feel stressed and talking to us. And I know not every leader is that way. You have to judge that a little bit. But if there's discontent, or there's something that we can do to ease the stress, it never hurts to ask or to have that discussion, because sometimes I think folks think that the leaders just know what's going on, and we don't always just know what's going on. And we feel awful later that had we only known that there was stress in somebody's life, we could have fixed it. And so have those discussions, have those conversations in a professional way, but remember to reprioritize not only your business life, but your personal life, so you can get done what's important to you and still have time to de-stress.
Thanks, Julie. So thank you all for your insight. And we will now open this up to for those of you that want to ask questions to the panelists. So you can unmute yourself and ask a question, or if you want to put it in the chat, we'll be able to see it there.
While people are maybe thinking of a question, I put this on here, and I know you guys touched on it a little bit, but something that even I personal and work life, sometimes have a hard time apologizing too much. And I know you guys touched on it a little bit, but do you guys have any advice to try and limit that apologizing to either your coworkers for needing to prioritize your family, or apologizing to your family for needing to prioritize your work?
I was gonna, I had thought about that a little bit, and one thing I thought of was, you might have to think about why you're apologizing. Because are you apologizing because you're spending way too much time at work, or way too much time flexing your hours at work, or is it a real apology? So I think if it's your employer's been incredibly flexible, and you've been flexing all this time with COVID, and you're not getting your stuff done, and you're apologizing for family time, you might have to reprioritize. All right, am I spending my time as wisely as possible. Same thing with your family. Are you cutting that time off when you've really gotten all the work things done during the day and now you're just lingering because you like to get everything off your desk as opposed to what really needs to be done? Again, time to reprioritize and set those limits for yourself, and then really adhere to those limits. If you say, hey, I need to be off that computer by 6 o'clock, absent an emergency, then really do it and follow through.
Yeah, picking up on that, I think that idea of boundaries and following through with what you say you're going to do, Julie, I think that's so powerful, because sometimes I'll catch myself, and the reason why I'm apologizing is because I've lost track of time and I, missed some family commitment because I'm just focused on the computer. And it's like, well, I could have fixed that. I didn't need to do that, right? It's because I blew through a boundary that I had set up. So, I think one thing just in terms of the language of, asking yourself, why are you apologizing? And just sort of being sensitive and empathic to that, and recognizing that there are a lot of things we don't need to apologize for that we do. And even just using different language can help. And I think it does signal more to other listeners a different message. So it's something that I continually work on, but I do think it's an important reminder that, we don't need to start out of the gate apologizing. Instead, it's take a beat and really reflect about the situation. Mm-hmm.
I think the other key is for all you guys on the phone or on Zoom or whatever we call this it's none of us do it perfectly either. So these are all, everything I've said is my hope and dream of what I would love to do 100% of the time, but none of us we're not going to be perfect in how we do this. And we're going to find those complications where it's, gosh, I wish I would have done it differently. Well, that's great. Then you take those experiences and learn it going forward for the next time. And I know that seems so commonsensical, right? But really learning from what didn't go so well, and changing that up for the next time. Just because it didn't go well this time doesn't mean you're stuck with that path going forward.
Last call for any questions.
I have a question. This is Jackie Becker. So one of the things that I have thought about, or one of the things that I'm trying to navigate is I see my team working incredibly hard. And I know that this past year has been very challenging, with, just navigating all the different things that COVID has really thrown at us. And I want to encourage them, and I want them to take me seriously to, to take those lunch breaks, to take those mental breaks, to just walk away, like, don't overwork yourself. Like, I mean, I'm a firm believer, like, family is first. And like, if you have, a good balance at home, you probably are going to work a lot better or be happier at work. And so what do you recommend, or like, how do you try to encourage that or instill that in your team? How can I convey that to my team that, hey, like, I want you to be, to have good work-life balance. And if you don't, like, approach me and let me know. So what are your thoughts, and how do you recommend, like, creating that sort of environment, encouraging your team?
I mean, I think for me, I know that when I see my team online, and I guess I shouldn't be online either after certain hours, I just kind of reach out and say, hey, I saw this email come in at 11 o'clock at night, or is everything okay? And, is there anything that we need to talk about as far as responsibilities? Do we need to balance anything out across the team, or do you need any support? I have found that I've asked that a lot more this past year than in previous years, because I think it is happening across the board, just because we are working more of us are working from home. And like I said earlier, that computer is just an arm's reach away, it seems like, at all times. So I've just kind of tried to initiate that. And I've tried to show that I'm kind of doing, I'm trying to also kind of hold back and ensure that, like I mentioned earlier, doing my yoga in the morning, or ensuring that I'm offline so that I can have dinner with my kids and things like that. So.
Yeah, I think it's been tricky, because, I don't know about your work environments, but we've got probably a third of the people back and then the other two are still flexible. That also creates its challenges because the people back are having to work normal business hours, if not longer. And the folks that are flexible are really enjoying their flexibility, and it creates some tension, actually, to be honest, between the two. So it's trying to, I think, what Nathalie just said is having those check-in moments. We've got, and it maybe not work for everybody. We have a weekly team meeting where sometimes it only lasts 15 minutes, but it's really checking in. How's everybody doing with the schedule? Do we have everything covered? Does anybody need, slack picked up from somebody else? And we didn't do that before COVID. I mean, we'll probably continue doing it going forward, maybe not quite as often. But I think the biggest thing is forcing people to take those breaks at home because you don't see them. And it's just so critically important. So I've just been a meanie and started telling people, I expect, especially because I can only really see it on the hourly people, I expect to see a lunch break. If you're lying and you work through lunch, we know you cannot work off the clock, so don't do it. But getting them back into that habit is really, really important. For those folks as well, because you just can't sit at your dining room chair for 8 hours or 9 hours a day and make it work.
Yeah, I think you both touched on a lot of things. For me, it's been check-ins with some built-in team happy hours, just check-ins, and also trying to model that. Early on, I was absolutely guilty of sending a lot of late night emails, and one of my teammates came and was like, bringing the team down if you feel, if people then feel like they need to. And I was like, thank you, I'm so sorry, good learning, humbling, and I was like, I can certainly do a time delay and wait to send that. So, making sure that I model that too. And then, even little things like sometimes out of office, I want to make sure people know that they can really be out of office when they do take their PTO and honor that. So if I suggest otherwise, especially for people who are new to the team, it makes that line feel really wobbly, and that's not something I want. So even just making sure I really hold the things and tell them back. If it's an emergency, that's one thing, but just as a matter of course, we should be able to step out, have the PTO, and then come back and really be recharged. And then the other thing is just keep that dialogue going. What I've seen is people have different schedules, and some people on my team have just different needs. They need to stop early because of their situation. They're working just as many hours, if not more. But if I ask the question, then I know not to schedule a meeting or to shift a one-on-one, and be sensitive to that. And really, it all can work out if we keep that dialogue going and listen to each other.
Great. Thank you for the event.
Well, I think we're probably at time then. So just in conclusion, as always, I'm very proud to be part of such a strong, vibrant, and indispensable industry. Thank you to our panelists for joining us today, as well as our attendees, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks,
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Be well.